Well, the government body that promotes business, innovation and employment in New Zealand, MBIE, is no different to MFAT, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade, when it comes to DEI and wokeness. MBIE even have a special training course to indoctrinate you. The only problem is that they're failing at their own wokeness, probably because they don't even believe in it. Let's check it out. So in a recent episode of McBlog, we looked at the DEI and wokeness of MFAT. MFAT is the New Zealand Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade. And there was no shortage of the wokeness, the inclusion of our rainbow community, sexual orientation and gender identity, even a special glossy booklet on diverse sexuality and gender. And they say that they stand alongside people of diverse SEs, that stands for sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression and sex characteristics. That's what SOGI stands for. They also stand alongside our Pacific family. I'm not quite sure why they grouped those two together. And they'd even promoted a brochure of glossy te reo Maori terminology for people of diverse SOGIs. So in response to that episode of McBlog, the Minister of Foreign Affairs actually released this statement where Minister Winston Peters said, since returning to the Foreign Affairs portfolio in November 2023, the Minister has been concerned about the impact that the woke agenda of his predecessor in the Ardern-Hipkins government had on New Zealand's diplomacy and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade. Over the past 16 months, the Minister has made clear to successive secretaries that he expects MFAT and the New Zealand diplomats to reflect the agenda of the current New Zealand government, and that's included a determination to remove reference to the previous government's policy priorities from the online publications, and he refers to outdated references. So in other words, he wants to get rid of all the woke material on the MFAT site. Excellent. But then some of you started forwarding evidence of other government agencies that are rife with it. Here we go. Have you heard of MBIE? The Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment. And it's the government's lead business-facing agency. And they say, quote, our contribution to improving the well-being of New Zealanders is summarised in our purpose to grow New Zealand for all. There it is. But is that the case? Well, under our commitments, they say that they're developing and maintaining our capability to engage Māori and understand Māori perspectives. Now, we'll come back to that commitment and see how they're doing. And then they talk about leadership. Leadership which is highly inclusive, culture, which is actively inclusive, and structure, which is to remove systemic barriers to inclusion. Okay, a lot of interesting definitions around inclusive there, isn't there? And then in 2023, they highlight the fact that, yes, they won the New Zealand Rainbow Excellence Awards, the Simpson-Grierson Impact Award for the Rainbow People Experience Project. And yeah, we quickly realised that your gender and your sexuality are MBIE's business, literally. Interestingly, nobody liked that post, not a single like. They were finalists in 2022 also. Now, they say that through the Rainbow People Experience Project in 2020, 3% of MBIE people were members of Ngāi Kahukura Rainbow Network, whatever that is. But here's the interesting thing, 11% identify as LGBTQIA+. 11%. Well, that figure is almost triple the national average according to the latest census. The national average is 4%. And that actually goes down to 15-year-olds. So that includes people not working at MBIE. That includes impressionable older teenagers who probably just like the tag and being different. But yeah, so that's disproportionate. I hope they fix that and lower the number. But MBIE have been pushing this messaging. Now, as you watch this little video clip, note the lanyards, virtually all the lanyards. And note the language, including the critical race theory and intersectionality. Oh, watch out for the inclusive religious leaders also.
MBIE has created an inclusive workplace for their people. The wide collaborative approach has prompted significant changes to the HR systems and practices.
So the People Experience Mahi is essentially us trying to deep dive into the experiences of our diverse communities at MBIE.
For diverse communities of Tangata Whenua, Pacifica, Asian and Rainbow, for example, it is about understanding and having conversations around race, intersectionality, how they bring themselves to work, and actually what are the barriers for them in the Eurocentric workplace that MBIE is.
Sometimes it's just about how an organization feels. When you walk around, when you have a conversation, when you're shaping policies and systems and processes, not just for MBIE, but for all of Aotearoa. And since our People Experience Mahi has taken place, we have seen a significant shift in who sits around the table to make these decisions, who's involved in shaping policies and processes and systems, and also whose voice is being heard. And these are some key indicators in shifting the workplace culture to being more inclusive and equitable.
Where we know that culture works well is where people feel a sense of trust and they feel a sense of being listened to. The senior leadership team sponsored this mahi, and that showed firstly that it was important. It was important to hear the voice of our networks, of our people. That is a taonga. And what we did with that taonga is we listened, and what our people are now seeing is the difference that makes.
It is an opportunity for our people, our voices to be shared, first and foremost, to be recognised with sincerity, aroha manaki, to people who can make change. How do we make this place so our mokopuna in the future can come to hikina whakatutaki and say, I belong here. The system's designed for me to succeed, and this place is set up for you to succeed.
Yes. Did you see all the reverence in pastors? Did you see all the inclusion for people of faiths? No, I didn't either. The diversity and inclusion only goes so far, eh? Gender, sexuality, race, intersectionality, but definitely not those Christians and other religious people. But then come the special sessions at MBIE to indoctrinate you. Now, you won't find this on their website. This has actually come from the official Information Act requests earlier this March from MBIE. But the interesting thing is that it's basically the relationships and sexuality education type material that you find in schools. So it's RSE in MBIE. And it talks about growing your, let's have a little look at this course, growing your gender understanding. Apparently, if you hold your mouse over the genderbread person, you can find the 4 gender constructs. Apparently, gender identity, gender expression, anatomical sex, and sexual romantic attraction are all different and all sit on continuums. Then, give it a go. I mean, did they steal this resource from a primary school? Our next lesson for the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment, by the way, Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment, is Up with the Lingo. You may have heard a number of different terms used by members of the rainbow community. Click on each I to learn more. Well, I know some of those. Let's click on B. B is for bisexual, often used interchangeable with pansexual. A bisexual or pansexual is a person emotionally, romantically, sexually and relationally attracted to multiple sexes, genders, though not necessarily simultaneously. They may not be equally attracted to a particular gender sex, and the degree of attraction may vary during the course of their life, or they may be attracted towards people regardless of their gender. Now, as an expert in this field, I would just like to correct them here. They're not interchangeable, actually, MB. They're different. Pansexuality is attraction to people regardless of gender, while bisexuality is attraction to 2 or more genders. So bisexual is when you are attracted to typically cisgender male and female people. So, people who understand biology, you're attracted to them. Pansexual means you're typically attracted to all genders of people regardless of sex or sexuality. Very important distinction. If you can understand it. I was also just interested in the plus bit as part of my indoctrination at MB. Plus covers all the other sexual and genders identities not covered in earlier letters. Here's the list. I never realised that drag queen was a sexuality or gender. Or cross-dresser. I mean, how can you cross-dress if you don't know your sex? I mean, isn't that the whole point? You're cross-dressing to the opposite sex. And, heterosexual straight. That means I'm part of the LGBTQIA plus divided by minus sign community. The census must have it all wrong. They said 4%, it should be 100%. Now, by the way, for those of us who understand biology and are put in the made-up category of cis, it means a person whose sense of identity and gender corresponds with their birth sex. Yeah, whose sense. They then refer to Rainbow Youth, and then there's a lesson on pronouns. What is a pronoun? How do I ask someone what pronouns they use, and why is it important to respect people's pronouns? In other words, why should you endorse a fiction and tell a biological lie? And they also have a list of some commonly used pronouns. They, them, theirs. And the example is, she ate their food because they were hungry. So it's just one person. Z, her. So Tyler ate her food because Z was hungry. They're talking about the same person. Commonly used pronoun is just use their name. Forget the pronouns. So Ash ate Ash's food because Ash was hungry. Well, Bob thinks that is stupid, and Bob is not going to let Bob South buy into the biological fiction. Bob refused. I mean, I sound like Tarzan, a Tarzan movie. And then it's time to join the group. They have a whole big box of these, just so you can feel really bad if you don't buy into the narrative. And remember the video I showed you earlier? Well, now you know why everyone has to wear one. In fact, note the wording that goes with this. It's an interesting choice of wording. Rainbow lanyards are a taonga, available for all MB people who support the LGBTQIA plus community, regardless of their identity, and it can be worn on all sites. You mean some lanyards are banned from certain sites? No, probably not. Wearing a rainbow lanyard, note the wording here, reflects your understanding and respect of people who have different sexual and gender identities. By wearing a lanyard, you agree to behave in a manner that shows your understanding and respect for this taonga and the rainbow communities. Wow, that's quite the creed, isn't it? I mean, is there an official handshake? So diversity, equity, and inclusion is all the rave at MB. I know you probably just thought they should focus on improving the economy and supporting businesses. In fact, during the research for this McBlog, I also came across this news item from January and highlighted by the New Zealand Taxpayers Union. MB spends $4 million to mix music for trees, prayer and magic potions to cure kauri dieback, playing the sounds of healthy kauri trees to those affected by kauri dieback in the hope that this approach may help heal them. And then there was this story from last August, and it says, the government is continuing to spend tens of thousands of dollars on contracted workshops for public servants, despite two of the governing parties rallying against them in opposition and saying they were about white privilege. The Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment, MB, the largest ministry, has spent $650,000 in the last 4 years on the sessions. Courageous Conversations is run by South Pacific Institutes, and its website says its mission is grounded in Te Tiriti and aims to, quote, elevate racial consciousness through interracial dialogue. And some of the workshops cost up to $18,000, just over. That's a pretty good fee, isn't it? MB's Chief People Officer, Jennifer Nathan, said under the law, the public service has to strengthen its diversion and inclusion capability, and the ministry's investment in this was important. It enabled MB's workforce to develop skills and capability to reduce unconscious bias, foster diverse and inclusive leadership, and develop cultural competency. Well, that's exactly what Winston Peters wants to get rid of with the New Zealand First Bill. But I was really interested just to see how diverse and inclusive MB really are. Now, they have a plan, but there's a couple of interesting graphs. They say, quote, "We aim to maintain a gender-balanced senior leadership cohort using 40-20-40. Now, that's 40% male, 40% female, and a balance of 20% of whatever, any gender, or if a person doesn't know their gender." Now, I had a look, and they actually have a disproportionate number of females. 61% female and about 37% male, which means 2% weren't sure. But look, that's okay. There's no weeping and wailing and gnashing of teeth and media coverage because there's more women than men, so it's all good. But they are slightly sexist, aren't they? But the gender pay gap is really, really important, apparently. Females are getting paid less than males. Shocking. Let's have a look. I mean, these guys are supposed to be woke. European males are getting paid the most. So MB are definitely racist misogynists. But hang on, Asians are getting paid less than Māori and Europeans. And Pacifica females there are on the worst rate. And how can Māori females be earning the same as Asian and Pacifica males? I mean, where's the gender pay gap? I mean, wow, this place is racist as. In fact, if you look at their staff, Māori are significantly underrepresented, about 8%, which is about half the representation of the population. Oh, and if you want to be promoted there, if you look at the difference between individual contributors, so that's just normal employees, and people leaders, so senior staff, if you want to be promoted, don't be Asian, be European. I mean, the DEI in MB is appalling. By the way, the gender pay gap, you hear about it a lot. It's completely misleading. It completely fails to take into account a number of key factors. In fact, the Cato Institute has an excellent summary highlighting these points. Just a couple of quick points. They say the pay gap is a natural economic result of choices men and women make, including how much or little to work and which occupations to enter. On average, women over 40 have 3 less years of experience than men of the same age. The reason for this should be obvious. They have babies. Women and men also make different choices in terms of occupations and education. Men tend to choose high-paying college majors and occupations. Men are more likely to select occupations with greater financial risk, such as jobs that pay commissions on sales. They are also more likely than women to take jobs with physical risk, such as construction, whose pay is higher owing to the risk premium. Men die on the job at 12 times the rate of women as well. And they conclude, the claim that the gap represents discrimination assumes that employers would pass up the chance to hire a woman at 84% of what they pay a man with the same training, skills and experience to do the same job. Since labour costs make up a significant share of total business costs, not only would employers have a strong incentive to hire women, but discriminators would have a hard time staying in business. So it just shows the whole gender pay gap is built on a fallacy. Even a woke organisation like MB can't seem to understand that, and ironically can't even deliver it either. Just finally, I did look at their adherence to climate alarmism. Their emissions have dropped 40%, but that's only because of COVID and because they're not travelling anywhere overseas much. Which begs the question, why were they doing it in the first place? And, well, actually, should they be travelling as part of good business? Now, as I summarised when we did the analysis of both MFAT and also KiwiBank, businesses are adopting diversity and inclusion training programs to brainwash their staff into accepting wokeness without question. Equity and inclusion departments are springing up with, as you saw there, people with PhDs to serve as political officers to search for, stamp out and re-educate any dissenters. And if you don't believe me, just talk to anyone who works at these organisations and who are petrified at speaking up. I mean, if you dare to question, you'll be called racist, sexist, or whatever phobic. Everyone is walking on eggshells for fear of failing the woke purity test, and the threat of cancel culture is an ever-present warning that your job, career, and reputation are on the line if you challenge this. But here's the key thing. Organisations like MB talk the talk. They virtue signal and they post all these policies around wokeness, but they don't deliver on it. They don't walk the walk. Their own stats admit that. And why can't they deliver? Because they don't really believe in it. It's just virtue signalling wokeness. They are fortunately more focused on merit and delivery of best product and services as is demanded by the taxpayer. And that's why so many businesses in the US are ditching DEI and around the world. DEI is slowly dying. It seems to be dragging its tail in New Zealand though. We need to encourage its demise.